The bikers noticed the black waitress freeze when dark motorcycles pulled into the lot. They saw the limp she tried to hide, the bruises beneath her sleeve. What they did next didn't involve fists or threats, but it gave her something she thought she'd lost forever. The bell above the diner door chimed like a warning. 12 leather-clad bikers walked in, their boots heavy on the checkerboard floor. The afternoon sun slanted through the blinds, cutting stripes across their faces. At the counter, an elderly man looked up from his pie, fork frozen midway to his mouth. A young couple in the corner booth pulled their toddler closer. Jax removed his sunglasses first. His crew followed. The Ironhawks didn't come here to scare anybody. "Gentlemen," Jax said, his voice carrying that particular kind of calm that made people relax. "We'll take the back booths." Coffee all around. The diner was called Betty's, one of those forgotten roadside places that time had polished instead of ruined. Red vinyl seats patched with duct tape, a jukebox that only played songs from 1995, the smell of burnt coffee and maple syrup thick enough to taste. Behind the counter, a black woman in her late 20s looked up. Her name tag read, Keisha, in faded letters. "Coming right up," she said, her smile genuine, but tired in a way that had nothing to do with the hour. Jax watched her move toward the coffee station. That's when he saw it. The slight hitch in her left leg. Not a limp exactly, more like she was protecting something, favoring one side. She moved like someone who'd learned to hide pain so well it had become part of her rhythm. His crew settled into the booths, still buzzing from the charity ride. They'd just delivered $3,000 worth of school supplies to the reservation up north. Good day, clean consciences. The kind of tired that feels earned. "Yo, Jax, remember when that kid asked if your bike was a rocket?" Leon laughed, pulling off his bandana. "His face when you revved the engine, priceless." Jax agreed. But his attention had drifted. Keisha was carrying a tray of mugs balanced perfectly. But that leg, she was compensating hard. When she reached their table, she set the cups down with practiced efficiency, but Jax noticed the slight tremor in her right hand. Overcompensating for the left side. "Sugar's on the table, cream's coming," she said. "You boys need menus or just coffee today?" "Just coffee is fine," Jax said. Then carefully, "Long shift." Something flickered across her face. "Every shift's long here," she said lightly, "but it's honest work." She moved to the next booth. The limp was more pronounced from behind. Jax's jaw tightened. Leon noticed his expression. "Boss, nothing," Jax said. But it wasn't nothing. The thing about Jax was this. He'd grown up in a house where his mother hid bruises with makeup and long sleeves. He'd learned early that silence could be its own kind of violence. He'd sworn at 15, standing over his father's unconscious body after he'd finally fought back, that he'd never ignore the signs again. Keisha brought their cream. When she leaned over to set it down, her sleeve rode up just slightly. Just enough. A bracelet of purple and yellow decorated her wrist, the kind that didn't come from jewelry. Jax's blood went cold. She noticed him noticing. Their eyes met for half a second, hers widening with something like panic before she tugged her sleeve down and moved away quickly. Too quickly. She caught her hip on the corner of a table, and a coffee mug crashed to the floor. The diner went silent except for the shattering. "Damn it," Keisha whispered, dropping to her knees. Her hands shook as she picked up the pieces. "I'm so sorry, I'll clean this up, Hey, no worries," the old man at the counter said. "Happens to everybody." But Jax saw what nobody else did. Tears gathering in her eyes that had nothing to do with a broken mug. And when she stood, she put weight on that left leg wrong and winced. A real sharp wince that she tried to hide by coughing. The cook came out, a heavy-set man with tired eyes. Keisha, you okay? Fine, Tommy. Just clumsy today. Her voice was bright. Too bright. Jax looked at his crew. They'd all gone quiet. Men who'd seen things. Men who recognized things. Leon leaned in. Boss, that's... I know, Jax said quietly. They finished their coffee in near silence. The usual banter felt wrong now. Jax left 2 20s for a $6 tab, then pulled out one of his business cards, the ones with just his first name and a phone number. No logo, nothing threatening. He waited until Keisha came back to clear their table. Ma'am, he said, standing. The rest of his crew stood too out of habit and respect. You take care of yourself. She looked at him, really looked, and for a moment something passed between them, an understanding, a question, maybe a plea. You too, she said softly. Jax placed the card under the 20s, face down. Then he and his crew walked out, the bell chiming again as they left. Outside, the late afternoon sun painted everything gold. The bike sat in a perfect row, chrome gleaming. Jax pulled on his sunglasses but didn't mount his bike yet. We staying? Leon asked. Not yet, Jax said, but we're coming back. He looked back through the window. Keisha was standing at their table, staring down at the card and the money. She picked up the card slowly, read it, then pressed it against her chest like a secret. That's when Jax saw them. 3 motorcycles pulling into the far end of the parking lot. Darker bikes, meaner edges, and painted across their gas tanks in violent red. A serpent with its mouth open, ready to strike. Keisha saw them too. Through the window, Jax watched her face drain of color. She stumbled backward, the card falling from her hand. She didn't pick it up. She just moved quickly toward the kitchen, her limp forgotten in her urgency to disappear. The men on the dark bikes hadn't dismounted yet. They just sat there, engines rumbling, watching the diner. Watching. Jax's hand curled into a fist. Boss, Leon said, a warning in his voice. We don't know what this is. We know enough, Jax said. But he didn't move toward them. Not yet. Instead, he started his bike and his crew followed suit. 12 engines roared to life in unison. A sound like thunder, like a promise. As they pulled away, Jax looked in his mirror for one last time. The men on the dark bikes were still there, still watching. And through the diner window, he could just make out Keisha's silhouette in the kitchen doorway. She was shaking. The rain started at 9 p.m. on October 15th, 2024, just as Jax turned his bike back toward Betty's diner. He'd tried to stay away, told himself it wasn't his business, drove 20 miles toward home with his crew, listening to Leon talk about his daughter's soccer game, pretending everything was normal. But that image, Keisha's face draining of color, her hands shaking, it wouldn't leave him alone. You know we're going back, Leon had said finally. Jax had nodded. Yeah. Now, 4 of them rode through the rain. Jax, Leon, and 2 others, Rico and Big Mike. The rest of the crew had families waiting. But these 4, they understood the kind of debt you owed to strangers who needed help. The diner's neon sign flickered against the wet darkness. Betty's Diner. Half the letters dead. The parking lot was nearly empty except for 3 motorcycles lined up near the entrance like sentries. Dark bikes, red serpent logos. They were still here. Park across the street, Jax said quietly into his headset. Lights off. They pulled into the closed gas station opposite the diner. Far enough to watch, but close enough to move fast if needed. Through the rain-streaked windows, they could see inside the diner clearly. Keisha was wiping down the counter, moving slower now, the limp more pronounced. She looked exhausted, but every few seconds she glanced toward the corner booth where 3 men sat. Leather jackets dark with rain, their patches visible even from across the street. Grave serpents. That's Vince, Rico said, pointing to the man in the middle. I'd recognize that bastard anywhere. Jax looked at him sharply. You know him? Know of him. Runs a chop shop operation out of the industrial zone. Mean son of a... Heard he put 2 guys in the hospital last year over a $50 debt. Rico spat into the rain. The kind who likes hurting people. As if on cue, Vince stood up. He was tall, broad-shouldered with a scar running from his eyebrow to his cheek. He walked toward the counter where Keisha stood, frozen. Jax's hand moved to his door handle. Easy, Leon warned. Through the window, they watched Vince lean against the counter too close to Keisha. She stepped back. He followed. His mouth was moving. They couldn't hear the words, but the body language was clear. Aggressive, possessive. Keisha shook her head, her hands gripping the counter edge. Vince reached out and grabbed her wrist, the bruised one. Even from across the street, they saw her face contort in pain. Jax's door opened before he realized he'd moved. Boss, Leon started, but then something unexpected happened. The cook, Tommy, came through the kitchen door carrying a baseball bat. Not threatening, just visible. He stood next to Keisha, solid and unmovable, said something short, pointed toward the door. Vince's laugh was visible even without sound. He released Keisha's wrist, held up both hands in mock surrender. But as he backed toward his booth, he pointed at Keisha, then tapped his watch. A clear message. I'll be back. I've got time. Jax forced himself back into his seat, forced his breathing to steady. She knows him, Big Mike said quietly. That wasn't random intimidation. That was personal. The serpents threw money on the table, not enough probably, and walked out. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. They mounted their bikes without hurry, supremely confident. Before starting his engine, Vince looked back at the diner one more time. Then he looked directly across the street at them. Jax's blood froze. They'd been made. Vince smiled slowly, revved his engine twice, a challenge, then pulled away, his crew following. Their taillights disappeared into the darkness like red eyes closing. He saw us, Leon said. Yeah. Jax watched the road where they had vanished. He wanted us to see him. Inside the diner, Keisha had collapsed onto a stool, her face in her hands. Tommy stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder. After a moment, she looked up, wiped her eyes, and stood. Forced herself to keep working, to keep moving. We need to leave, Leon said. If Vince knows we're watching, he might come back harder. Yeah. Jax started his engine. But we're not leaving her alone. What's the play? Jax thought about his mother, about the night his father had finally gone too far, about how nobody had helped until it was almost too late, about how silence and good intentions meant nothing without action. But he also thought about strategy, about the fact that Vince was expecting a fight. Men like him always expected fists and fury. They understood that language. So Jax would speak a different one. We find out everything, he said. Who Vince is, what he wants with Keisha, why she's scared, and then we don't just chase him off. We make sure he can't come back? How? Jax pulled on his helmet, rain streaming down his visor. By being smarter than him. They rode away slowly, deliberately, but when they reached the main road, Jax stopped, pulled out his phone, called a number he hadn't used in 6 months. Detective Morrison, it's Jax. Yeah, I know it's late. Listen, I need information on someone. Name's Vince. Runs with a crew called the Grave Serpents. Behind them, the diner's lights flickered through the rain. And inside, Keisha locked the door, turned off the open sign, and finally, let herself cry. The Ironhawk's auto shop smelled like motor oil and possibility. Jax arrived at 6 a.m. on October 16, 2024, before the sun had burned off the night's fog. The shop sat on the respectable side of town, a legitimate business they'd built over 8 years. Clean, legal, everything their father's generation hadn't been. Leon was already there, bent over a computer in the office. "Couldn't sleep either?" Jax asked. "Not after last night." Leon turned the screen. "Detective Morrison sent this over an hour ago." The file on Vincent Vince Mallory was thick. Assault charges dismissed. Suspected involvement in stolen vehicle operations. Insufficient evidence. Known associate of organized crime and proven. The pattern was clear. Dangerous but careful. Smart enough to stay just outside the law's reach. "There's more," Leon said. He clicked to another document. Morrison dug deeper, found something interesting. A photograph appeared. A younger Vince, maybe 5 years ago, arm around a smiling black woman at some outdoor festival. The woman's face was partially obscured by sunglasses and a summer hat. But Jax recognized the slope of her shoulders, the shape of her smile. Keisha. They were together, Jax said quietly. For 2 years, according to Morrison's source. She filed a restraining order 3 years ago, but it expired after 12 months. Then she disappeared from public records entirely. The office door opened. Rico walked in carrying coffee and a grease-stained folder. "Got what you asked for," he said, dropping the folder on the desk. "Called my cousin in county records. Did some creative searching." He grinned. "Keisha Washington doesn't exist before 3 years ago, but Keisha Brooks, she shows up everywhere before that. Same birthday, same social security number pattern." Jax opened the folder. DMV records, employment history, a blurry newspaper photo from a community fundraiser, all under the name Keisha Brooks. "She changed her name," Leon said. "Used her mother's maiden name. Started over." "Smart girl," Rico added. "Moved 60 miles away, took a job at a nothing diner where nobody asked questions. Thought she was safe." Jax's jaw tightened. "How'd Vince find her?" "That's where it gets interesting." Rico pulled out another sheet. "Remember the diner Keisha used to work at before she ran? Little place called Eddie's near the industrial zone." "I know Eddie's," Leon said. "That's right next door to Vince's main operation, a garage called Serpent Motors." Rico tapped the paper. Keisha worked the morning shift, which means she saw everything coming and going, every shipment, every suspicious transaction. She was a witness to whatever they were running. The pieces clicked together in Jax's mind, like an engine falling into place. "She wasn't just his girlfriend," he said slowly. "She was a liability." "Exactly." Morrison's source says the feds have been watching Serpent Motors for 18 months. Suspicion of running stolen auto parts through what looks like a legitimate repair shop. They strip bikes and cars, move parts across state lines, sell them to unsuspecting shops. Big money, minimal risk if nobody talks. And Keisha could talk, Jax finished. Big Mike arrived then, his massive frame filling the doorway. Despite his nickname, he stood 6'5" and 300 lbs of solid muscle, but his voice was soft. "Just drove past Serpent Motors," he said. "Place is busy this morning. Lots of bikes coming and going. But here's what's weird. I recognized 2 of those bikes. They were reported stolen in 3 different counties last month." Jack stood, pacing the small office. His crew watched him think. They'd learned years ago to let him work through problems his way. "Vince found Keisha," Jack said finally. "Probably through sheer bad luck. Someone recognized her, or she wasn't careful enough. Now he's back in her life, and he's sending a message. Keep quiet, or else." "So we go in there and teach him what 'or else' really means," Rico said, cracking his knuckles. "No." They all looked at Jax in surprise. "Boss, we can't just let this," Leon started. "We're not letting anything slide," Jax interrupted. His voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "But think about it. Vince expects us to come at him with fists. It's what guys like him understand. We roll up to his shop, throw some punches, maybe win, maybe lose, and then what? He comes back harder, brings more guys. It escalates. People get hurt. Maybe Keisha gets hurt in the crossfire. He turned to face them fully. We're not doing this his way. We're doing it smart. He pointed at the papers scattered across the desk. Morrison says the feds need evidence. We'll get them evidence. We'll expose every illegal operation Vince runs. We'll tear down his empire piece by piece until there's nothing left for him to come back to. And Keisha stays safe because Vince is too busy dealing with the cops to think about her, Leon said, understanding dawning. Exactly. Jax picked up the folder. We protect her by making him irrelevant. Rico whistled low. That's cold, boss. I like it. It's strategic, Jax corrected. And it works. He looked at each of them. We do surveillance. We document everything. We build a case the feds can't ignore. And we make sure Keisha's name never comes up in any of it. How long will that take? Big Mike asked. Jax smiled grimly. However long it takes, we've got time. Vince doesn't know that yet, but he will. Keisha's apartment was on the 3rd floor of a building that had seen better decades. Peeling paint, a broken buzzer system, the kind of place where nobody asked questions, and the rent was always cash. Safe, she'd thought when she moved in 3 years ago, anonymous. She'd been wrong. 2 days had passed since the night in the diner. 2 days of looking over her shoulder. 2 days of Vince's words echoing in her head. I found you once. I'll always find you. She'd called in sick to work, something she never did. Tommy had understood without asking. Take all the time you need, he'd said gently. He was a good man, one of the few. Now Keisha sat on her worn couch, staring at her phone. The business card sat on the coffee table, just a name and a number. Jax, 555-0147. She'd picked it up 100 times, put it down 100 times. What would she even say? Help me, I'm scared. She'd tried the police before. They'd been sympathetic, filed reports, issued a restraining order that had meant nothing the moment Vince decided it meant nothing. A knock at the door made her jump. Keisha's heart hammered. She moved silently to the peephole, her bad leg throbbing. It was worse when she was stressed. The old injury flaring up like a reminder of the night she'd finally left Vince. The hallway was empty. She waited a full minute before unlocking the door and opening it carefully. Nothing, just the usual stained carpet and flickering fluorescent light. Then she looked down. A cardboard box sat at her doorstep, plain brown, no markings. A white envelope rested on top. Keisha glanced down the hallway, still empty. She grabbed the box quickly and retreated inside, locking the door behind her. Her hands shook as she opened the envelope. The note inside was written in neat, blocky handwriting. You're safe now? J. 4 words. Simple. Impossible. Keisha opened the box with trembling fingers. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, was a pair of shoes. Not just any shoes, orthopedic walking shoes, the expensive kind with proper arch support and cushioned soles. Black, professional, her exact size. A small tag was attached. For the long shifts, something cracked open in Keisha's chest. She sat on the floor holding the shoes and cried. Not from fear this time, from something else. Something she'd almost forgotten existed. Kindness given without asking anything in return. She cried until she had no tears left. Then she put the shoes on. They fit perfectly. When she stood and took a few steps, her leg didn't protest. The support was exactly where she needed it. How did he know? Keisha walked to the window, wiping her eyes. Her apartment overlooked the street, a quiet road with a laundromat, a closed pawn shop, and a small parking lot. She pulled back the curtain slightly. 3 motorcycles were parked across the street, chrome gleaming even in the overcast afternoon light. Two men bent over one of the bikes, seemingly adjusting something. Tools spread out, casual, natural, except Keisha recognized the leather jackets. The way one man, Leon, she thought, kept glancing up at her building. The way another kept his hand near his pocket, ready. They were watching, protecting. Her first instinct was panic. They're strangers. You don't know them. But even as the thought formed, she realized she did know something important. They'd seen her at her lowest, and hadn't demanded anything. Hadn't judged, just left a card, and walked away. And now they were here keeping watch while asking nothing in return. Keisha let the curtain fall back into place. She should feel violated, watched. Instead, for the first time in 2 days, her shoulders relaxed, her breathing steadied. She walked to her couch and picked up Jax's card again. This time she saved the number in her phone. Didn't call, just saved it. A lifeline if she needed it. That night she slept better than she had in weeks. The next morning, Keisha woke to the sound of rain against her window. She made coffee, cheap instant, but it was hot, and moved to her usual spot by the window. The motorcycles were still there. Different men this time. One huge man who somehow looked gentle. Big Mike, she'd learn later. And another with a scarred face who kept checking his phone. She watched them for 20 minutes. They never looked directly at her window, but she knew they knew she was there. It was a dance, an understanding. Keisha made a decision. She got dressed, putting on her new shoes, and grabbed her jacket, walked downstairs and out the front door. The rain had stopped, leaving everything smelling clean and new. The men across the street stiffened slightly as she emerged, but didn't move. Keisha walked to the corner store just a block away, bought milk and bread, normal things. The men stayed where they were, but she felt their attention tracking her. Protective, not predatory. She was learning the difference. On her way back, she paused at the crosswalk. Then, without looking directly at them, she raised one hand in a small wave. Barely noticeable, just an acknowledgement. After a moment, the huge man, Big Mike, nodded once. Keisha walked back to her building, her limp barely noticeable in the new shoes. As she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she realized she was smiling. Actually smiling inside. She picked up her phone and typed a message to the number she'd saved. Thank you for the shoes and for everything else. She hit send before she could change her mind. The response came 3 minutes later. You're welcome. We're not going anywhere. Keisha read it twice, then set her phone down. She walked to the window and opened the curtains fully this time. Let the light in. Let herself be seen. Across the street, one of the men gave her a subtle thumbs up. She laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in what felt like forever. The warehouse on Pike Street had been abandoned for 6 years, according to county records. Empty. Forgotten. A ghost building in a neighborhood of ghost buildings. Except it wasn't empty. Jax crouched on the roof of the adjacent building. Night vision binoculars pressed to his eyes. Below, in the supposedly abandoned warehouse, lights blazed behind blacked-out windows. Vehicles moved in and out through a side entrance that had been carefully hidden from the main road. Count, Leon whispered beside him. 4 bikes in the last hour. 2 trucks, all Serpent affiliates. Jax lowered the binoculars. And look at the security. Cameras at every corner. Motion sensors on the doors. A guard rotation every 30 minutes. This wasn't just a storage facility. This was a fortress. That's a lot of protection for an empty building, Leon observed. Because it's not about what's inside now, Jax said slowly. It's about what moves through here. They'd been surveilling Serpent Motors for 5 days. What they discovered was more sophisticated than expected. The garage was legitimate, barely doing just enough real work to maintain the cover. But the real operation ran through 3 other locations. This warehouse, a storage unit facility on the east side, and a paint shop near the county line. A network carefully constructed, almost invisible. Almost. "Rico, you in position?" Jax spoke quietly into his radio. "Affirmative. Got eyes on the loading dock." Rico's voice crackled back. "They're moving something big tonight. Just saw a flatbed arrive with what looks like motorcycle frames. At least 20 of them." "Get footage," Jax ordered. "Everything." Big Mike's voice came through next. "Boss, I'm at the paint shop. They're respraying a Ducati right now. Still has the original VIN visible. Matches the one reported stolen in Columbus 3 weeks ago." Jax smiled grimly. "Document it. Make sure you get the VIN numbers clear." This was the pattern they'd uncovered. Vince's crew stole high-end motorcycles and cars across multiple states, brought them to the warehouse for disassembly, moved the parts to the storage units, resprayed valuable frames at the paint shop with new colors and fake documentation, then sold everything through seemingly legitimate channels, including their own repair shop. Brilliant, profitable, completely illegal. And they were about to tear it all down. "Leon, the drone ready?" Jax asked. Leon held up a small quadcopter barely bigger than his hand. "Modified it myself. Silent running, infrared camera, GPS tracking, completely untraceable." "Send it up." The drone lifted into the night sky, invisible and silent. On Leon's tablet, thermal images appeared, heat signatures moving inside the warehouse, people working, machinery running, a full operation in what public records claimed was an empty building. "Beautiful," Leon breathed. "This is everything the feds need." But Jax wasn't satisfied yet. "Evidence is one thing. Proof of the larger network is another. We need the connection," he said, "between all 3 locations. We need to show this isn't just one bad warehouse. It's an organized operation." As if on cue, Rico's voice crackled. "Boss, got something. 2 men just loaded a truck with parts. I ran the plates. Truck's registered to a shell company. Same company that owns the storage units. Tiny checked out last week. And the paint shop," Big Mike added. "Just checked. Same LLC owns all 3 properties." There it was. The thread that connected everything. "Who owns the LLC?" Jax asked. Leon was already typing on his tablet. "Searching now, got it. Serpent Automotive Holdings. And the registered agent is..." He paused. "Vincent Mallory." Jax felt the satisfaction of pieces falling into perfect alignment. "Send everything to Detective Morrison. Every photo, every video, every document, and make copies for the news stations, all 3 major networks." "Boss, are you sure?" Leon looked uncertain. "The news could complicate things. Make Vince suspicious." "That's the point," Jax said. "We're not just taking him down. We're making sure everyone knows what he did." No shadows to hide in this time. Over the next hour, they executed the plan with precision. Anonymous email accounts, untraceable uploads, carefully worded tips that provided just enough information without revealing their source. To Detective Morrison. Check Pike Street Warehouse, active chop shop, thermal imaging attached. To Channel 7. News. Major theft ring operating in industrial zone. Evidence attached. More coming. To the FBI's Cybercrime Unit. Interstate vehicle theft operation. Documentation of sales across state lines. VIN numbers included. Every message sent from different locations, different devices. Nothing traced back to them. Nothing that mentioned Keisha. Jax had learned something important in his years running the Iron Hawks. There was more than one way to win a fight. Sometimes the smartest move wasn't throwing the first punch. It was making sure your opponent couldn't throw any punches at all. "It's done," Leon said finally, closing his laptop. "Everything's sent." How long until Morrison moves? Big Mike asked over the radio. Based on what we gave him, 72 hours maximum. He'll need to verify, get warrants, coordinate with other agencies. Jax checked his watch. By Friday, Serpent Motors will be swarming with cops, and Vince will be too busy dealing with the fallout to think about Keisha. Jax stood, stretching his stiff muscles. That's the point. We removed the threat without Keisha ever being exposed as a witness. What if he figures out it was us? Rico asked. Jax smiled coldly. We didn't do anything. We just observed and shared what we observed with the appropriate authorities. Nothing illegal about that. As they packed up their surveillance equipment, Jax took one last look at the warehouse. Inside, Vince's crew continued their work, completely unaware that their entire operation had just been documented, packaged, and delivered to every law enforcement agency that could possibly care. The empire built on fear was about to crumble, and it would happen without a single punch thrown. Keisha had made a mistake returning to work so soon. She thought that after a week, things would calm down, that Vince would disappear back into whatever hole he'd crawled from. Tommy had assured her the Iron Hawks were still watching, that she was safe. But safe was a relative term. It was midnight on October 23rd, 2024, when she finished her shift, the diner empty except for Tommy counting the register in the office. Keisha took out the trash through the rear exit. A habit, a routine. The alley smelled like grease and rain-soaked cardboard. The dumpster's metal lid clanged as she lifted it. Hello, Keisha. She dropped the trash bag. It split open, garbage spilling across the wet pavement. Vince stepped out from behind a delivery truck, hands in his jacket pockets. He looked different. Thinner, with dark circles under his eyes. His leather jacket was unzipped, no crew behind him, alone. That somehow made it worse. Vince. Her voice cracked. You can't be here. I just want to talk. He moved closer and Keisha backed against the brick wall. But there was something off about his approach. No menace in his stride, just exhaustion. Please. 5 minutes. I'll scream. Tommy's inside. I know. I'm not here to hurt you. Vince stopped 6 feet away, and in the dim alley light, Keisha saw something she'd never seen before. Fear in his eyes. My life is falling apart, Keisha. Everything's gone. Good, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. The cops raided the garage 3 days ago, seized everything. My accounts are frozen. The feds are building a case. His laugh was bitter. Someone talked or someone watched. I've got investors threatening me, crew members running. It's all gone. Keisha's heart pounded. The Iron Hawks. They'd done this somehow. They'd actually done it. I don't know what you want me to say, Keisha managed. Vince ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she remembered from their early days together before everything turned dark. I want you to know I'm sorry for everything, for how I treated you, for being what I became. Keisha stared at him. This was new. Vince didn't apologize. Vince didn't admit weakness. You broke my leg, she said quietly. When I tried to leave the first time, you pushed me down the stairs and then told the hospital I was clumsy. I know. You terrorized me for 2 years, made me afraid of shadows. I know, his voice cracked, and I can't take it back. But Keisha, I loved you in my own messed up way. I did. And when you left, everything good left with you. That's not love, Vince. That's ownership. I know that now. He took a step forward. Keisha tensed, but he just held out his hands empty, pleading. I'm leaving, going south, starting over. But I needed to see you first, to tell you I'm sorry, to ask if there's any part of you that could ever... No. The word hung in the cold air. There's no part of me that will ever forgive you. Keisha continued, her voice growing stronger. You didn't love me. You controlled me, and I'm done being controlled. Keisha, she said. No. Both of them turned. Jax stood at the mouth of the alley, his silhouette backlit by the streetlight. He walked forward slowly, deliberately, his boots echoing on the wet pavement. No weapon, no crew, just presence. Vince's jaw tightened. This doesn't concern you. It does, actually. Jax stopped beside Keisha, not touching her, just standing there, a wall of quiet strength. The moment you stepped into this alley, it concerned me. You! Vince's eyes narrowed. You're the one who's been watching. You fed the cops everything. No, Jax said calmly. The cops did their job. We just helped them see what was already there. Vince's hands curled into fists. And for a moment, Keisha saw the old Vince resurface, the violence, the rage. But then something shifted. His shoulders sagged. The fight drained out of him. You took everything, Vince said, his voice hollow. You built everything on fear, Jax replied. His tone wasn't triumphant, just matter-of-fact. Stealing, intimidating, controlling. You thought that made you powerful, but fear's a weak foundation. The moment someone stops being afraid, it all collapses. Vince looked at Keisha. Are you with him now? Is that it? I'm with myself, Keisha said firmly. For the first time in years, I'm with myself. Jax continued, his voice low and steady. We built our business on respect, on trust, on actually helping people instead of exploiting them. You know what the difference is, Vince? Our foundation doesn't crack. Guess you win then. Vince's words were bitter. This wasn't about winning, Jax said. This was about making sure she could sleep at night without looking over her shoulder. You made your choices. Now you live with them. Vince stood there for a long moment, looking between them. The man who'd once seemed so large, so terrifying, now just looked small, defeated, human. I really am leaving, he said finally. Tonight, you'll never see me again. Good, Keisha said. Vince nodded slowly. He looked at Keisha one last time, not with anger, but with something like regret, then turned and walked away. His footsteps echoed down the alley, fading into the distance. No roar of a motorcycle, no dramatic exit, just a man walking into the darkness. Gone. Keisha's legs gave out. Jax caught her before she hit the ground, lowering her gently to sit on the back step of the diner. She wasn't crying. She was just empty, hollow, like a weight she'd carried for years had suddenly vanished, leaving her unbalanced. Is it really over? She whispered. Jax sat beside her. Yeah, it's over. How did you... Right now, just breathe. So she did. Sat in the cold alley with a stranger who'd become her protector, and breathed. For the first time in 3 years, she breathed freely. The courthouse smelled like old wood, and justice delayed. Keisha sat in a small witness room, her hands folded in her lap. Through the one-way glass, she could see the prosecutor reviewing notes. A female detective sat beside her. Not Morrison, but someone from the special task force assembled specifically for the Serpent Motors case. You're doing great, Detective Sarah Chan said softly. Remember, they can't see your face. Your voice will be altered in the recording. You're completely protected. Keisha nodded, but her throat felt tight. It had been 1 week since Vince left. 1 week of newspaper headlines and news broadcasts showing raids on the warehouse, the paint shop, the storage facilities. The evidence the Ironhawks had gathered, though no one knew it was them, had triggered a federal investigation. Now, Keisha was the final piece, the witness who could connect Vince to everything. They're ready, Chan said. Keisha walked into the deposition room. A camera was positioned to film her silhouette, her face deliberately kept in shadow. The court reporter waited, hands poised over the keyboard. Please state your name for the record, the prosecutor began. Keisha Brooks, her legal name, the name she'd tried to bury. But I went by Keisha Washington for the past 3 years. And why did you change your name, Miss Brooks? Keisha took a breath. Then she told them everything. About working at Eddie's diner. About dating Vince, not knowing what he really did. About the morning she saw stolen motorcycles being unloaded at Serpent Motors. About Vince's threats when she tried to leave. The accident that broke her leg. The restraining order that meant nothing. About running, hiding, starting over. She spoke for 2 hours. Every question answered. Every detail documented. When it was over, Chan walked her out through a side entrance where Jax waited in his truck. "How'd it go?" he asked, as Keisha climbed in. "I don't know if I helped," she said quietly. "You did." Jax started the engine. "Trust me." 3 days later, the arrests began. Keisha watched the news from Tommy's apartment. He'd insisted she stay with him and his wife until things settled, an offer she'd gratefully accepted. The television showed footage of federal agents in raid jackets leading handcuffed men out of various locations. Vincent Mallory's mugshot flashed on screen. He'd been picked up trying to cross into Mexico. The multi-state vehicle theft ring, which authorities estimate was responsible for stealing over $15 million in vehicles and parts, has been dismantled, the news anchor reported. Federal prosecutors say they have enough evidence to ensure lengthy prison sentences for all involved. Tommy's wife, Maria, squeezed Keisha's hand. "It's over, mija." 12 members of the Grave Serpents Motorcycle Club face charges, the broadcast continued. However, several associates have turned state's evidence in exchange for reduced sentences, including providing information about other criminal enterprises. The next segment surprised Keisha. A reporter stood outside the Iron Hawks auto shop. In a surprising turn of events, the Iron Hawks MC, a local motorcycle club with a complicated past, has been awarded city contracts to provide automotive repair services for municipal vehicles. Shop owner Leon Hayes says the club has worked hard to legitimize their business. Leon appeared on screen looking professional despite his leather vest. "We've been clean for 8 years. We hire people who want second chances. We believe in redemption through honest work." The Hawks have also announced plans to expand, creating 30 new jobs in the community, the reporter continued. And they're hiring from an unlikely pool, former Serpent associates looking to leave gang life behind. Keisha's phone buzzed. A text from Jax. Turned to Channel 4. She changed the channel. Another news segment. This one focused on community impact. 3 former Serpent mechanics who were unaware of the illegal operations have found employment at the Iron Hawks shop. A different reporter explained, "It's a story of rehabilitation over revenge." The camera showed a young man Keisha vaguely recognized. He'd been at the warehouse but always looked uncomfortable. He spoke nervously. "I just needed work. I didn't know what Vince was really doing. When it all came out, I thought my life was over. But the Hawks gave me a chance. Clean work, legal work." Jax appeared on screen briefly, declining an interview with a polite wave. But Leon spoke again. "Our founder believes everyone deserves a second chance if they're willing to take it. These guys want to do right. We're helping them do that." Keisha felt tears forming. This wasn't just about taking down Vince. It was about building something better from the rubble. 2 weeks after the arrests, Keisha received a phone call from Detective Chan. "The grand jury returned indictments on all counts," Chan said. "Vince is looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. His associates are taking plea deals. It's over, Keisha. Really over." "What about me? Do I have to testify in court?" "No. Your deposition was enough. You can move on." Move on. 2 words that had seemed impossible a month ago. That evening, Keisha met Jax at a coffee shop. Neutral ground, away from the diner, away from his shop. Just 2 people sitting across from each other. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You don't have to. You gave me my life back." Jax shook his head. "We just gave you space to reclaim it yourself. You're the one who had to be brave enough to testify. You're the one who survived." Keisha smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. What happens now? Whatever you want. You're free, Keisha. Actually free. She thought about that. Freedom. Not running, not hiding, just living. I think I'd like to stay, she said. At the diner, in town, maybe get to know the people who helped me. Jax's eyes crinkled with a smile. We'd like that. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. A new day ending. A new life beginning. The sign went up on a Tuesday morning in November 2024. Keisha stood in the parking lot, hands on her hips, watching two workers secure the new neon letters to the front of the building. The old Betty's Diner sign, half the letters dead, the apostrophe missing, had been taken down the week before. The new sign glowed warm and golden even in daylight. The rusted halo. You sure about this? Tommy asked, walking up beside her. He'd officially made her co-owner last week, said she'd earned it by keeping the place running when he'd been thinking about giving up. I'm sure, Keisha said. New name, new beginning. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind. The insurance money from the fire damage they'd fixed years ago had finally come through after an audit triggered by the federal investigation. Turns out, Vince's cousin had been the adjuster who'd delayed payment. With that money and a small business loan, they'd renovated. New booths with intact vinyl, refinished floors, a working jukebox with songs from every decade, fresh paint on the walls, a warm cream color that made everything feel lighter. The kitchen had new equipment. The coffee was actually good now, but more than that, the place felt different, safer, like the ghosts had been exorcised. The bell over the door chimed. New bell, clearer sound. And the first customers of the evening began arriving, regulars who'd stuck with them through everything. New faces drawn by the story in the local paper. Local diner rises from ashes of organized crime. Keisha had hated that headline, but Tommy had framed it anyway, hung it in the back office as a reminder. By 5 p.m., the dinner rush was in full swing. Keisha moved between tables with practiced ease, her limp barely noticeable now. The orthopedic shoes helped, but more than that, she wasn't carrying the weight of fear anymore. Her body had remembered how to move freely. She was refilling coffee for a family of 4 when she heard them. The distinctive rumble of motorcycle engines. Through the window, she watched 12 bikes pull into the parking lot in perfect formation. The Iron Hawks, chrome gleaming in the golden hour light. They dismounted in unison, removed their helmets, and walked toward the entrance like they'd done this 1,000 times. Maybe they had, Keisha thought. Maybe they'd been protecting people like her for years, and she'd just been lucky enough to cross their path. The bell chimed. Jax entered first, his crew behind him. The diner didn't go silent this time. People barely looked up. The Hawks had become part of the community these past weeks. Respected, trusted. Gentlemen, Keisha said, unable to stop her smile. Welcome to the Rusted Halo. Nice name, Leon said, grinning. Got a story behind it? Everything's got a story, Keisha replied. You want the back booths? You know us well, Jax said. She brought them coffee. The good coffee now, not the burnt sludge from before. Set down cups with steady hands. When she reached Jax's spot, he was studying the renovated space. You did good, he said quietly. Place feels right now. We had help, Keisha said. Someone gave us a second chance to see what safety felt like. Their eyes met. An understanding passed between them. Gratitude, respect. Something deeper that neither was quite ready to name. As Keisha turned to take another table's order, Jax reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small object and set it beside his coffee cup. A keychain, brushed silver shaped like a feather with surprising detail. A single word engraved along the spine. Freedom. Keisha finished with the other table and came back. She picked up the keychain, feeling its weight. "What's this?" she asked. "For when you're ready to ride," Jack said simply. Keisha's breath caught. The keychain felt like a promise, like possibility, like everything she'd been too afraid to want. "I don't know how to ride a motorcycle," she said, her voice soft. "That's what lessons are for." Jax's smile was gentle. "No pressure, no timeline, just when you're ready. If you're ready." Keisha closed her fingers around the keychain. Through the window, the sun was setting, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. The world looked different now, open, full of roads she'd never dared to travel. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." Jax nodded. "You did the hard part. You survived. You testified. You rebuilt. We just made sure you had the space to do it." The crew finished their coffee as the sky deepened from gold to purple. When they stood to leave, each man nodded respectfully to Keisha. Leon squeezed her shoulder. Big Mike gave her a gentle smile. Rico tipped an imaginary hat. They filed out, and the engines roared to life one by one. Keisha walked to the doorway. The keychain clutched in her palm. She watched as the Iron Hawks pulled onto the highway, their taillights growing smaller against the twilight. Jax was last to leave. Before he rode off, he looked back at the diner, at Keisha standing in the doorway of her new life, and raised one hand in farewell. Keisha raised hers in return. As his engine faded into the distance, she felt something wet on her cheek. She touched it, surprised to find tears. But they weren't tears of fear or sadness. They were something else entirely. Relief, gratitude, hope. She looked down at the feather keychain in her hand, traced the engraved word with her thumb. Freedom. Maybe she would learn to ride. Maybe she'd call Jax next week and take him up on those lessons. Or maybe she'd just keep the keychain as a reminder that she could if she wanted to. The choice was hers now, and that made all the difference. Keisha stood there as the last light faded from the sky, half smile on her lips, watching the horizon where the hawks had disappeared. Behind her, the diner glowed warm and welcoming. The rusted halo, a place reborn. She slipped the keychain into her pocket, turned, and walked back inside. To her life, to her future, to freedom. The end.